Welcome, everybody, to the Retro Cool Guy podcast. I am your host, the Retro Cool Guy, and as always, I'm joined with my buddy, the Drunken Beard, Nick. How you doing, buddy?
Living the dream as always. Pleasure to be here again.
Yeah, how's that Elden Ring treating you, man? You still getting beat up?
No, I think I pretty much 100% that thing at this point. A lot of fun.
100% already. Just a month, huh? Like you just started that not too long.
Yeah. Well, once you kind of hit that level, you kind of just want to finish it all the way through again and again and again.
Very nice, man. Very nice. All right, folks, and so today we're going to be talking about BaseWars for the NES. And as always, I promised you all a very special guest. He is a retro sports game expert. He is Pete Skerritt. Hey, Pete, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate that.
Hey, dude, I'm really glad that you're here, man. We're doing a sports game, and you were the first person I thought of that I would want to bring onto this show. I've seen you on Twitter, and I've seen your alias. And yeah, so why don't you tell a little bit about yourself and why you are a retro sports game expert?
Well, I've been playing retro sports games since my days with the Commodore 64 in the mid and late 80s, starting with Hardball and Fourth and Inches. And once NBA Jam came out in the early 90s, that was pretty much it. I focused a lot on sports games from that point forward. So I've put together over the last 10 years a big collection of games. I collect a lot of sports games dating all the way back to the NES, and some of them are still sealed, in fact, that I have here that I just kind of open up and check out the instruction manual as though they were new. And it's been a lot of fun kind of going through history and seeing these games evolve and develop from the mid 80s all the way to current day.
Now, you said you picked up new and sealed versions of these games. All right.
Yeah, in fact, I just got in the mail today. I just got a brand new copy of ESPN NBA Tonight 2002, which is from 2001, I believe. So that game is 21 years old, still fresh in the factory seal, still has the ID label at the top. And I'm looking forward to getting that open because unfortunately, with PS2 games, especially the blue-backed CD-ROMs, sometimes they get a little finicky in some PS2s. So to be able to get a new one you can open and put in there without fingerprints, without minor scratches or scuffs, and just have it play brand new. It's a pretty special feeling. Plus, getting to play a game, opening it up for the first time and playing it for the first time after 20 years or even longer is a really cool thing to experience.
Do they still have that new game smell? Like, is that still in there after all those years?
Sometimes
'Cause
they
when I
do. Sometimes they do, although a lot of it
yeah.
is just going through the manual and feeling like the tackiness of the pages because they've never been touched. And seeing the warranty cards and seeing all of the old websites that are no longer around. Um,
Do you get a
that's
lot
just
of the
neat.
posters? Do you get a lot of posters finally? Because that was
Um,
always my favorite thing to get out of the game. A new game was a poster. If it came with a poster, that really made like my day. So
for NES and Super Nintendo and Genesis, it was really nice to get those additional things. Once we moved on to the PlayStation and later, we started to see fewer and fewer of those. I do have a copy of MLB Pennant Race for the PlayStation from '96 that has a poster that came in it, but it's a pretty small poster. It's very similar in size to the poster that came with Baseball Advance for the Game Boy Advance from 2002, I believe. But still, getting those posters and those like in some of the Madden games, some of the play calling sheets and player rosters, and just looking at the plays, those were really cool extras to have that we just don't have anymore.
that's definitely true, man. They definitely don't package things the way they used to. Now you get nothing. Like I've literally opened games and there's nothing in there anymore. Not
Not
even a
yeah,
slip of
not even a
paper.
game.
Yeah, sometimes not even a game. Sometimes it's just a key to download a game.
Yep.
Ah, such sad times. So, how big is this collection? Like, how many games did you say that you have?
In
Just in
total,
sport.
I've got about 3,500 or so. For sports games, it's probably a little less than a third. Um, I've been focusing a lot on the original PlayStation of late, and there are a lot of sports games for that. In fact, I have a cabinet that's just for my sports titles, and I can't even fit all of them in there. I have some of them still on a like a wall unit. So I've been focusing more on PlayStation, but PS2 as well. That's really the era that I've been most interested in because with the advent of CD and DVD-ROM media, you can fit a lot more in it. You can fit a lot more in terms of statistics and player likenesses and game modes and historic teams and things like that. That on cartridge media wasn't always easy to be able to fit into that limited amount of memory.
Yeah, a lot of the newer sports games. I think Madden 2005 is probably the one where I felt like they really did a good job of going in depth like that with the franchise mode and being able to, get set prices on the concessions, not just pick your teams and all that stuff. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, Madden '05. That has two versions for the PlayStation. You get the vanilla one, which a lot of people got, and there was a collector's edition that had even more things like being able to play some of the older 16-bit Madden titles and 32-bit Madden titles, and there was a trivia game and some other things on there. That particular sports year 2005, that's when we had that epic battle between NFL 2K5 on one side and Madden 2005 on the other side. And while those two fought it out, the real winners were sports video game fans like us because we had two fantastic football games to play that year.
I really missed that. Yeah, that was a great year. I missed having options when it came to sports games. Today, it seems like there's not a lot of choices. You know what I mean? If you want to play football now, there's Madden, and that's it. Uh, Back then, I don't know. We just had so much more, and it was good, really great
Yeah.
to have those options. So
Competition breeds quality. If you have
it
more games out there to pick from, you have more development teams that are grinding it out to try and make their games better. If you just have one game for one particular sport, I mean, look at basketball, for example. Used to have NBA Live and NBA 2K kind of going nose to nose with each other. When NBA Live fell on its face and it was just 2K left, you've kind of seen what's happened. The game's just kind of been grinding its gears and doing its thing and focusing more on its my team and its trading card modes, and it really hasn't evolved all that much. It doesn't have a game like Live or a game like Shootout or a game like NBA Courtside or something like that to really move it forward. It knows it's going to get a lot of money because it's the only choice out there. So 2K can kind of take their foot off the gas in terms of development and focus more of their effort towards the My Team modes that generates them more revenue.
very true. Uh, so the prices, though, I mean, for the sports games, it seems like the prices drop off really fast. So is collecting the sports games? It's got to be affordable, right?
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean, you
if you
can't.
were looking into going retro sports game collecting, as long as you're not some weirdo like me who likes to get them sealed, because those tend to get a little bit more pricey. But if you're looking at even complete sports games for the Genesis especially, it's relatively cheap to be able to get those. I was able to build a collection for just cartridge only to start for NES and for Genesis really quick in my first year collecting back in 2012. um, Going from there, like for PlayStation and PS2, the games are still relatively cheap on the sports side. I have seen some games come up in recent years, like ESPN NFL 2K5 has started to creep upwards in value. And of course, after Coach John Madden's passing, we've seen some of the Madden games creep up in value a little bit. But a lot of games are super affordable. So if you have a particular year that you really want to revisit. Maybe your particular team in your town won a Super Bowl or a World Series that year, and you want to relive that time by having those exact same rosters. You can get those games for relatively cheap and be able to go back in time a little bit.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to play those. I still love going back and playing like NHL '95. I'm a Detroit Red Wings fan, so they were pretty hot back then with Better Off and everyone. So
Oh yeah,
that was one of my favorite teams growing up watching them.
one of the
Uh,
best hockey games of all time, NHL '98 for the PlayStation, turns 25 this year. and that game features the Red Wings pretty prominently against the Avalanche. I'm sure you remember those battles all too well between
Oh
those two
yeah.
teams. They did not like each other. Playing through that game, popping in a PlayStation and playing it today, even though it's a little crude looking, hearing the two-man commentary booth and seeing how fast the game moves and how lethal that one-timers are, especially from the slot. It's just so much fun to be able to revisit. And I've talked about it on Twitter before. It also has one of the best full motion video intro sequences in a sports game that I've ever seen. It just really gets you into it, gets the blood pumping, and you're ready to go out there and hit somebody on the ice.
Right, I remember you posted that. That is a great opening scene. It's fantastic. So what are I know this is gonna be a tough question, but do you have a favorite of all the sports games?
I'm an
Can
NBA
you narrow
Jam
it
guy.
down to one?
I'm an
Just
NBA Jam
NBA
guy.
Jam.
I'm an NBA Jam guy.
Maybe not that hard of a question.
I NBA Jam for me is kind of it's a funny story. NBA Jam I went to an arcade and I didn't even know that this game was a thing. I went into this arcade and the volume was pumped up. So I was like, what is that sound? What is that game? So I went over and I looked at it and it's this basketball game in 2-on-2 and I'm watching and it's the fourth quarter and somebody broke the backboard, like shattered the backboard glass. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I had to get my quarters and I wanted to play against the person who had won. And I won't forget it. I was down two with less than a second to go. And I inbound the ball and I just throw up a prayer from half court and it goes in. I beat the guy. And at that point, right there, I knew that I was going to be a fan for life. And I have been. As a matter of fact, I got autographs from a couple of from one of the game designers in from Tim Kitzrow. Sal DeVito is the game designer, and I have that autographed copy. It's a Genesis copy that I have autographed, and it's one of my most prized possessions. Just getting to talk to Sal about the game and talk to Tim Kitzrow and listen to how still excited about that series that he is after all these years was really something else. And I can go back, I can play the Genesis version, I can play the Super Nintendo version. Um, and I can enjoy myself as much now as I did back in 93 or 94 when I first got my Genesis copy back in March of 94.
Pete, I know we spoke a bit before the show on kind of the state of sports games in general, but I was kind of curious at what do you think your favorite non like traditional sports game was, other than, or at least like a hidden gem of a sports game that maybe some people overlooked throughout the years.
I like to go back to Arch Rivals a lot, and I also like to go back to a game called High Impact Football. These two games, both Arch Rivals and High Impact Football, are forefathers to NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, respectively. So it's fun to kind of go back to the past a little bit. I remember playing those in arcades before their successors had come out, but I had a lot of fun with those. And we had been talking before the show about how I decided to pop Arch Rivals into my NES tonight to kind of get me in the mood for the podcast here. And I got absolutely destroyed. I lost by 30 points. My player shot 19% from the field, which never happens. I was like, okay, I guess I will not be playing that again for a little while.
Right.
Because usually in midway sports games, we know that there's some kind of rubber banding that keeps the scores close. So you're never really getting blown out. There has to be some kind of setting, like a tournament settings or something like that, where you're not getting absolutely crushed. This is the first time in a long time. Now, granted, I hadn't played Arch Rivals in months, but this is the first time in a long time that I got pantsed by the computer, something fierce. And I was actually doing it as kind of a test run for for Twitch, and I'm glad I didn't record it because that would have been super embarrassing. But those are the games I like to revisit, the older midway games to kind of see where they were, and then look at NBA Jam and NFL Blitz and NHL Open Ice and see where they went based on those initial beginnings, where you didn't have the licensing at first, but once you're able to talk the NBA and the NHL and the National Football League into buying in, these became epic, epic games.
So, how do you feel about baseball games?
Baseball is one of those things. It's kind of It's a funny story because in football we had the epic 2K versus Madden battle, right? Where Madden eventually won that war by just getting an exclusive license with the NFL, and then 2K was basically out of business. They tried to come back with All Pro Football 2K8, but it really wasn't the same thing. Uh, the reverse happened with baseball, where we had a fantastic series in MVP baseball from EA Sports, culminating in MVP Baseball 2005, which many people, myself included, consider to be one of the best baseball video games of all time. People still play this game and update rosters to this very day, despite the fact that MLB The Show is doing more than a good job of holding its own. But in
So again,
response,
back to sorry. So again, back to 2005 though. So 2005 really was the best year.
2005 was just an amazing year. We had the best of the ESPN games across the board. ESPN NBA 2K5 was great. ESPN NHL 2K5 was the best that it had really been to that point. MLB 2K5 was doing okay. Baseball was kind of going through a little bit of a change, except for MVP baseball, which was just absolutely just crushing it with every release. Um, and then we were on the doorstep. We were about a year away from Sony basically just rewriting the baseball landscape by introducing the show, which would come out a year later. But yeah, 2005, that sports year in both sides. I mean, NBA Live 2005 was great that year too. And I think the only minor disappointment was NHL 2005 because that series was still in the middle of its changing its identity. But even so, I mean, just going back to that year, I can pick out any of those games from EA or from 2K and then just sit down and enjoy any of them, even to this day.
Awesome. You really brought the knowledge here today, dude. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all this with us, man.
Sure thing. This is, I
Uh,
mean, it's been a passion of mine for years, and it's fun to be able to talk about it. It's one thing to be able to type and write about it or talk about it on Twitter with friends, but it's really another to sit and talk to some friends and some nice people and to an audience and kind of share what I know.
and that's exactly why I wanted to start this podcast. So I could talk to people like you to, bring in their expertise and share that stuff here. And that's a great story about NBA Jam, man. That's really cool that you got to meet him and you got his autograph and everything.
Yeah, it's great. I have that and that and NFL Blitz both autographed, and they're both in my cabinet. It's really neat.
That's fantastic, man. Well, Nick, do you have any other questions for our guest today?
I think you pretty much covered everything there, boss. As you know, I'm not a huge sports player. I usually played most of the, sports related stuff. So it's nice to hear all the backstory and stuff on the other titles.
Well, all right then, guys. Are you guys ready to jump into some base wars for the NES?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, here we go. So, base wars for the NES. Well, the full title is actually called Cyber Stadium Series Base Wars on the NES. This is a Konami game, or an Ultra game, or as I like to call it, an Ultra Konami game. It was released in 1991 for the NES, and in this game, it's a baseball, but it's robot baseball. And like I said before in the last episode, it's customizable robot fighting baseball. And this game is fantastic. Uh, Pete, I went to your website and I noticed you did a write up on this game. So you have some experience with this game.
Oh yeah, this was an interesting game to play, especially coming off of Atari's Cyberball, which was robot-based football. This seems to be where that the idea for such a title came from. They take a lot of influence from Cyberball in terms of robot combat and in terms of just the way that it's presented, this futuristic feel, and that's one of the things that I really love about the game.
Yes, let's give our listeners a little bit of the backstory of how this of what this game is exactly. So it's and I think the best way to do that is to read from the manual itself. Uh, so I'll just let it speak for itself. Okay, here we go. Now you'll know what slugfest really means. At least it can be told how, at the turn of the 24th century, the game of baseball was changed forever. It happened in Cape Cod Peace, Florida, during the annual winter meetings. On the aluminum paneled walls of the posh hotel's presidential room hung stirring portraits of baseball's all time greats, legends like Cecil Rooftop Shingleton, Travis T. O. Justice, and Tip Rude Waiter. Around the huge conference table sat a group of sour, seething executives, collectively known as the baseball team owners. The issue before them? Astronomical player salaries. A Solar League official had just ordered one of the weakest franchises to shell out 2.4 billion a year for to Gomer Go Homer Gomez, a lifetime average hitter of only 250. For hours, the owners debated their options until suddenly Irving Floppadopoulos, owner of the Boston Banshees, leaped from his chair and slammed his fist on the table. Robots! He exclaimed. The other owners looked blankly at each other. Then smiles slowly crept across their faces as they realized they had found the solution. Replace the players with mechanical men. No more salary demands. Better yet, no more salaries. Just obedient automatrons, pre-programmed for action. The now inspired owners worked feverishly that weekend to refine their new sport, which they christened BaseWars. The public was quickly captivated by this bizarre combination of baseball and gladiatorial combat, played by an army of armor-clad cybernetic swingers. They especially loved the one-on-one battle royales for base possession, the loser of which is retired to the scrapyard. Wasn't long before Base Wars became the new intergalactic pastime. So there you have it. The players have been replaced by robots, and they changed the rules up. So when you go to take a base, let's say you hit the ball, you run to first base, catch it, throw it to first base instead of it being an out, a forced out. You battle for the position, battle for the base. The Let's talk about that. Nick,
Yeah.
how much battling did you get to experience in this game?
Well, for the first, I think 2 playthroughs, I didn't even do any battling because the AI was, pretty poor at the whole thing. So, I actually didn't get into the battling until near the end of it, and I was caught by surprise, but it was also pretty fun, being able to, go through and then also customize the weapons. For a while, I was like, what are these weapons for? I want to use them. So I had to pull up the manual to figure out what I was supposed to do. I have a feeling this game is way more fun with another person, than trying to fight the AI.
Definitely. uh, the the fighting to me almost felt kind of broken in this game. If you had the wheel robot, the guy with the wheel, you could
Hmm.
basically just tap the B button over and over fast enough,
Well,
and you would do the spin move and just
hmm.
hold them in position. And then once you got certain weapons, it was just the other people didn't stand a chance. Like the laser gun. I know you have to dish out 60,000 credits to get the laser gun, but once you get that, there's nothing they can do. You just hold the button. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, every time I did any of the combat, basically I just button mash and I seemed to basically kill the AI. Seemed pretty effective.
Yes, button mashing definitely does help. Uh, Pete, how did you feel about the combat in this game, man? Like,
combat was a
in your
good
experience?
concept, I think, because
Mm.
in baseball, if we're being honest, like baseball can get pretty boring, especially as a spectator, or even when you're playing just regular NES baseball. Like force outs and fly outs, it's just in there, done that. We saw it with the original baseball. We saw it with Baseball Stars. We saw it with RBI Baseball. We saw it with Bad News Baseball, Legends of the Diamond. You go down the list. So BaseWars attempted to do something different by implementing this one-on-one fighting mini game, much like we saw with a mini game in Blades of Steel, where we had that fighting mini game aside from the actual hockey game on the ice. I just don't think that
Right, I remember that.
I don't think that Konami was able to really flesh it out as much as they wanted to. I think if there was a sequel or if they had continued the Cyber Stadium series, I think we might have seen an upgrade to the combat in a later title, possibly with football, which is where I think that Konami wanted to go after baseball. Um, but as it stands, it's something that kind of separates the game and makes it a little bit different. Not necessarily better, but different.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you. It is a great concept. Like, I love the idea that they're trying to do this, and like, it's not completely broken. It's still fun. Like, and I didn't win every fight, but I did. I had a lot of fun fighting and winning when I did win, and when I figured out how you can win, then it became even more fun. But I think, Nick also brought up a good point. It's definitely better against, another person, probably, Way I can imagine it being way more fun than against the AI. Having someone there with you,
I just personally felt at least most of the games I was playing, played for probably 2 or 3 hours, and the robot AI was really easy to just get home runs against, and then also getting them out. So I didn't feel like I was forced to do any of the combat or anything most of the time.
yeah, the combat doesn't happen enough. I was playing through the pennant, race mode. And once I got enough credit to get the laser gun, of course I wanted to try it out. So I was like on purpose trying to trigger that combat, like throwing slow pitches and, just trying to give them like a base hit so that way I could do it. And man, it took forever. Eventually I finally got it, but it was the shortstop, not the first baseman. So he didn't have the weapon. But anyways, eventually I got it to work. So that being said, so Nick, you probably didn't get a chance to experience the pennant race mode. That's like their season mode or franchise mode.
Uh,
As well.
You actually warned me not to do it, if I remember correctly. So I'm like, okay, I'll just avoid that mode. Um, I was
uh,
tempted, but I'm like, all right, well,
yet I heard Pete laugh there. Pete, do you have any idea why I might have warned him not to do this?
I mean, to me, the franchise mode is it's a little convoluted for what it's supposed to be there for. Getting into the franchise mode or the hero mode or whatever they want to call it, just picking the right team and then all the different customization, you can get lost for blocks of time at a time trying to get teams the way that you want to get them. And then if the computer has to manage certain teams, that can take a little while. That's the same kind of thing that bogs down a game like Baseball Simulator 1000, for example, where there's a lot of simulation that goes on. You have to wait through. Um, Again, good idea and concept, but I just don't think that the technology was there yet. I don't know of very many
Right.
NES games that did franchise NES sports games that did franchise modes very well outside of Tecmo Super Bowl and maybe Tecmo NBA basketball.
Yeah, I really like the stat, that the stats. Well, I mean, some basic stats that didn't get really deep. It was just home runs, ERA, and like how many fights you won. And but the one thing that bothered me with the the pennant race mode, and the whole reason I told Nick just not to do it is because it's like you said with Baseball Simulator. There's a lot of simulation, and what they mean by that is so you start a 5 game pennant race and you pick 6 teams, including the one that you select. And then you play each team 5 times. So that's 25 games. So it's not a big deal. You play 25 games. Now, most sports games, when you're playing your games, the other teams are simulated, and then at the end you get everybody's stats for the games that were played while you were playing, but not in Base Wars. No.
Mhm.
You play your game, and then you have to watch every other team play every other single game. There's no way to skip it. There's no fast forward. You can pause it in case you want to stop it or slow it down. You need to go, you know, into it or something. That was the only thing that really brought this game down for me in the pennant mode race. I don't want to watch all the extra games. Like that it was a bit much for me, that whole part of it.
Nobody wants to do that. I mean, that was a problem with a lot of the earlier sports games that wanted to do a franchise mode. Is how do we simulate it without actually going through the game? We can't generate results fast enough. That's why even in a game
Yeah.
like Baseball Simulator 1000, when you're simulating the game, you're not watching the game take place, but you're still letting the CPU kind of figure out what's happening in each game and generate statistics for each game. So you're kind of sitting and you're waiting, and you're waiting, and you can feel the beard starting to grow back in as you wait, and you can wait some more. The plants are starting to wilt. You can see puddles evaporate while you're waiting for these games to finish simulating, and it doesn't work well. By the time we got to the Super Nintendo and Genesis, simulation speeds were a bit quicker, so you could go through and you could play pennant modes or careers or series without having to wait and wait and wait.
Yeah, see, when I was a kid, I grew up on those sports games on Genesis and Super Nintendo. So I didn't play a lot of sports games on NES, other than like Tecmo Bowl. So and well, I had Base Wars when I was a kid, but I certainly don't remember having to sit through every single game. Maybe I didn't, and that's why I don't remember because I just decided no.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, so I remember those games, playing Madden, and it would simulate the scores for the other games. And yeah, you had to kind of watch the screen scroll, but it was, wasn't anything like this. Watching entire games. Uh, some of those games actually went into extra innings.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm like, really, come on, like 13 innings of this. Like, I don't want to do this. I
I mean,
started
the
doing I started playing other games, like, thankfully, I got some handhelds and stuff, so I was playing other games, I was, shopping for homeowners insurance, just trying to grind through it, because I did want the stats, like, I was like, "Yeah," I'm like, "Okay, I hit all these home runs, but am I the best? I have to see what they did," so,
I guess the
uh,
alternative would have just been to show a blank screen with a status bar from, you know, 0 to 100% how long it's going to take to load. So I guess that's all. The compromise was to allow you to watch it while it was
yeah,
happening.
I guess you gotta take what you can get, right? I noticed a few things while playing through this pennant mode race game because I had a lot of time to watch all these different teams.
Mhm.
So I will give them a lot of credit for this game. I don't have the teams in front of me. Nick, maybe you can pull those up on screen or something. Get just all the
Yeah.
teams listed there. Uh, they did a good job. Like, okay, there's only two color palettes. You're either red, pinkish, pinkish red, or blue, right? But when you're playing a different team, you can tell the difference. When you're playing New York, you can tell the difference when you're playing Boston, Toronto. They all have different characteristics. They did a really good job with that. Detroit's pitcher kicked my ass. Oh my god. He held me to
Mm.
2 runs. Like, other Toronto, I blew him out,
You
56 runs. You know
you
what I
say
mean?
that, I am literally no, Detroit is overpowering clubs that win simulated via CPU v CPU, so they tend to dominate.
The pitcher for Detroit was really good, against me anyways. Like, that was the best one. Uh, and New York, okay, whoever designed this game over there at Konami, I know you guys like to keep it a secret, but whoever did it is clearly a New York Yankees fan, clearly, because I had to watch all these games. So I watched the New York Yankees, or the New York team in this game, wreck every single team. The only losses that New York got were from me. They smoked everyone else, especially Boston. So I'm like, okay, clearly, clearly these people like New York because they're loaded. And then the Boston team, speaking of, they they were like one of the worst. Their whole team was nothing but one of the same robot.
All
Like
cyborgs, yeah.
it was, yeah, it was all cyborg. It's like really now. So somebody was biased here. So Pete, did you notice anything about that? How do you feel about the AI on this baseball game? Compared to other stuff that was out at that time. What do you think of this?
Konami really didn't, with its sports games, and it's across the board, whether you're talking about Blades of Steel or Double Dribble or Base Wars here. The AI was not really all that much to speak of. The only time you got some questionable AI in terms of like maybe a little bit cheap was a game called Super Basketball in the arcade, where that game felt like it cheated a little bit, but that was because you were putting quarters in, so it had to in order to kind of get you to keep emptying your pockets. With Base Wars, to me, I didn't think the AI was all that great. But if you look across the board at all of the baseball games, from Nintendo's baseball in 1984 all the way down the line, you really don't have a lot of games that put up a good fight with AI. As Nick said, the best way to play baseball games, especially, is to play with a buddy, because that way you're really getting the best test of your talents. I can beat RBI baseball any day of the week with any team if I'm playing the CPU. But when I was growing up and I first played the game in 87 and 88, and against my best friend, he would just kick my tail every time. It's the human element. AI back then wasn't all that structured. It was enough, and sometimes, like in the case of Arch Rivals, where I got dusted tonight, sometimes the computer just decides
Mm,
you're just not gonna win. I'm sorry, pal.
right.
Uh, but more often than not, if you're playing the computer, you can usually win. Because home versions of arcade games or sports games back then didn't have the insert quarters element, so it didn't have to be brutal. Uh, Even in a game like Tecmo Super Bowl, where you had a sliding difficulty scale as you went further through the season, you would get teams that would play you tougher and tougher the more games you played through. You could pick a game like, you could pick a team like the 49ers and just blow through opponents for their first few weeks. And then you start to see things change once you get midway through the season and beyond. Passes that you used to complete, you don't complete anymore. There are more fumbles, more players get hurt. And that's kind of like the great equalizer, right? But Tecmo Super Bowl was also much later in the console's library. And Tecmo, I think, was the only company, especially with their later sports games, to really get a handle on AI. And we saw that improve to a much greater extent in the 16-bit era, thanks to good sports programming, good input from actual players and coaches, and just more horsepower to work with.
Yeah, the sports games really made. I feel like they made a big jump there between NES and Super Nintendo and Genesis.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the processor power is what really matters for a lot of the sports games, just being able to simulate, just numbers.
That's what it is, right? If you think about it, if it's all simulation, I mean, it's almost like a massive D&D game if you think about it. You're looking at
Hmm.
statistics and it has to be, what happens in this situation? Where does the ball hit the bat? Where is the ball off the plate? How fast is the player on the base paths? How fast are the fielders? These are things that the more processing power you get and the better programming you get, the more realistic these things can be. Like you can't really compare a game like Base Wars to MLB The Show, for example, because there's way too many variables that PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5 can calculate without even thinking about it, whereas an NES would just kind of pack it up and go home. Like, I don't know what to do in this situation. You want me to calculate what? And it
Yeah.
would just stop
Yeah.
working. But at the same time, it also becomes less accessible, right? If you're trying to make things too realistic, where you're calculating all these variables and there's no just stuff happens, if you're calculating everything, then it's almost too close to life, and then you don't have that feeling of being like a video game athlete like you did back in the NES and Super Nintendo and Genesis era, where you could throw for 300 yards and it felt great. Now, if you throw for 300 yards or if you hit 2 home runs in a game or pitch a shutout or whatever it is, there's no, I guess there's a sense of accomplishment there, but it's not as much fun. It feels more like work or actually being on the field. And I think that's something that's a bit different here. With a game that's fantastic, like a Base Wars or a Cyberball, where it takes place in the future and it's all robot based, and they have these incredibly weird backstories about too much salary, or in Cyberball, just they didn't want players to get hurt, so they decided to put robots in the field instead. It's you could have more fun with that. A game like NBA Jam, you could push players down, and it was out of fun. Players weren't necessarily getting hurt. NFL Blitz, you had players getting suplexed on the field. Of course,
Mm.
the commissioner didn't like that very much. But
Yeah.
those were still fun, and it added like a fun element. It wasn't the seriousness of competition. You can't hear like the bells playing in the background and thinking about the Raiders and stuff. All you're doing is just going out there and having a good time. And in Base Wars, it's really what it was, or games like Bad News Baseball, or Little League Championship, Little League World Series, or whatever it was. Those were just fun to play. And while there was some realism here and there, it was more just getting on the field with a bunch of friends and just having a good time.
And yeah, you guys are both right. This game, the pennant race would be fantastic. Like on a Saturday, man, if you had a big group of friends, I mean, you could do up to 6 people, and you could each pick your team. You could all play against each other. You don't have to do a 5 game series. You could do a 3 game series, 2 game series. I'm pretty sure you can even do one. You know, so it's great for that to have you know that sort of setting. Have everyone around, drink a few beers, cook some food, barbecue, play baseball. Maybe if you're doing like a fantasy draft or something like that, if you got everyone's really into baseball, this game would be absolutely perfect for that sort of thing.
Hmm.
So something else I want to jump into about this game, which I love and hate at the same time, is the pitching. The pitching mechanics is it's the coolest, most awful, best thing I've ever seen in a baseball game. I love it. I mean, okay, so you're on the mound and you have what I can only describe as a Mega Man charge shot for a pitch. That's how you pitch. You charge it just like you would if you're playing Mega Man and you want to use his charge shot. And the more you charge it max, the faster the ball goes. The less charge, the slower it goes, but way more control of where that ball goes. And I mean way more control.
Mhm.
You can take the ball way off the screen. If you just tap the B button and hold left or right, it's gone. The ball's gone. Like it's a ball. Of course, it's not gonna be a strike, but it it's that much control. Like
I mean, that was my favorite part about the game, to be honest with you.
I loved it, and I loved using it, but I hated playing against it because the AI would throw some of the wackiest pitches, And like I said earlier, Detroit, I don't know how they programmed that guy, but he had this one pitch. It's almost like a curveball, but it's not because it arches, but it goes way out to the right and then it comes back down. So if you just imagine an arch ball, travel coming, and then it comes right back over the home plate, right into the strike zone. So if you don't swing, it's a strike, even though it's way, way outside at first. At the last second, it drops right in on home plate. There's no way a human could make that pitch in real life.
That's
I tried to simulate it myself. No luck. I couldn't master that one.
Oh, I thought you meant
Uh,
in real life. I'm like, I don't think you're a robot. I don't know if you could
no,
actually.
no.
I was
On
like,
the
well, that's pretty
game,
impressive.
I can't throw. I can't pitch. No, that's not. No.
Yeah,
No,
basically
on
that
the
ball
game.
is a drone. You can fly it anywhere you want.
Yes, exactly. That's a drone. It's a drone ball. Yeah. How do you feel about the mechanics and the pitching on this game compared to everything else that was out at the time? It was totally different.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's a timing mechanic versus a thinking about what pitch to throw um and also the trajectory. With Base Wars, everything moves on the x-axis only. There's no y-axis.
Mm.
You don't have balls that dip low out of the strike zone. It's either moving slow or fast or left to right. You don't have like a curve ball that'll break down into the dirt. Which with robots, because they're not using their fingers to add rotation to the ball, that's to be expected. So it is something that's definitely different. It's not something like an RBI or a Bad News Baseball uh, or anything like that, where you're getting that traditional pitching. Is something that's different, something that's based on that timing, and that's what makes playing a game like that on a high definition TV with input lag difficult. It's almost one of those games that if you're not playing it on a CRT or a monitor with really low input lag, that timing can sometimes be affected.
I didn't seem to experience much lag. You know, I hear a lot about that, about people experiencing lag on their systems when they play it on a flat screen TV.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a thing.
And I understand it's a thing, but am I missing it? Is it my TV that has
No,
because
you're just
I have
old, and I think
am
you're
I just
just.
old?
Or you've adapted.
It's
Just don't notice?
yeah.
I've adapted. I don't understand because like I was playing it on a top loader NES, okay, and I've got it hooked up to my Philips flat screen TV,
Hmm.
and it's hooked up through the coax cable, and I set it to game mode on the TV,
That helps.
and
Yeah, a lot.
I don't know, like I don't seem to experience that sort of
Yeah.
lag
So
on my system.
depending on the game, platformers are really apparent with it because of depending on your TV, it could be like a 30 millisecond delay, or like on my projector, it's actually I think almost 70 millisecond delay,
Mhm.
even in game mode. So that's almost like a non thing you can do with my projector. You're not going to play an old school platformer. That's why I also have the CRT, because there's a 0 millisecond delay and it's always flawless. So it's really dependent on it, and of course you kind of will adapt to it's not a huge delay on especially more modern TVs and the game modes on the panels, but it's there. And of course, if everything in line, so if you also have it plugged into like your uh uh was it like your Denon receiver, that adds another 10 or 20 millisecond thing for it. So it's a thing.
A lot of people adapt to it unconsciously. Well,
Hmm.
they struggle with it very briefly, and it's like, okay, and they adapt when they would press a button. I saw this most when I would watch people try and beat Mike Tyson
Oh yeah.
using a flat screen TV without the game mode on. The input lag would be so rough that like nobody could do it. I used to beat him at home, no problem. Well, that's the thing, is that you're going to have that delay, and if you're not able to adjust to it, especially facing Tyson, where the windows for commands are so narrow, if you don't adjust, it's going to be a long day.
couldn't beat Tyson if my life depended on it. No matter what kind of TV I had, that guy just stomps me.
You're not the only one, my friend. I haven't beaten him yet either, and I've been playing that game for decades, so you're not the only
That's
one.
not a game we're ever gonna cover.
Oh no, now it's definitely next. We're gonna have to cover that, and you have to beat. No, I
No way.
I have not beat that. I have beat Castlevania and stuff though. So that's
Hey, that's
Battletoads. Are
pretty
we
good.
are we gonna go beat Battletoads next?
Hey, let's not not throw
Here
any
comes the turbo
spoilers.
tunnel. Oh boy.
Oh boy, here we go again.
Think there's nothing like that in Space Wars. This game is pretty straightforward. Um, real quick, let's just. There's not much to talk about with the music on this game. Uh, I mean, it's pretty basic. There's only a couple tracks. It sounded very much like Ninja Turtles to me.
Mhm.
And after like the 50th game of watching it, I just down. It's not, it's okay. It's a baseball game. It would like if I was there with a friend, we wouldn't even really notice the music. You know what I mean? We would have been talking over it, but it's there you're by yourself. It fits the game. It's not bad. It's not great.
I can't even remember the music to be honest with
It's
you.
inoffensive.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's like I said. It's not elevator music.
Mhm.
Elevator music, basically.
It's the voice work that
It's
stands out
good.
more than the music itself. It's the voice
Yeah,
samples
yeah.
that
they did
stand
a
out.
really good job. They did a really good job with the voice work, and great job bringing that up because yeah, gotta give
That
them
was the one
credit
thing
on the
that
good stuff there, and that was pretty cool, man. They didn't do a
that,
lot of
that
that.
grabbed my attention immediately. I'm like, oh, there's actual voice samples.
Konami was good with
Yeah,
that. Konami's programming for the NES, they were pretty good about putting voice samples in their games. I mean, just thinking about some of the Turtles games, for example, hearing just some of the minor voice samples when the music would play. Um, I think that Konami really had such a strong grasp of the NES hardware, their internal programming teams, that the music and the sound, especially the voice samples in this particular game, for a baseball game, you're not going to get a lot of music that stands out anyway. And because it's futuristic, then we're going to play like "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" or "Charge" or anything
Yeah,
like that. These are concepts that were long since past. So the music took a back seat, but where the music lacked, I think that the sound effects and the voice samples kind of stepped it up and uh, make it feel futuristic while at the same time being pretty clear sounding for an 8-bit device with a sound chip that's pretty average.
and the cutscene
Hmm.
as well.
Yep.
They did a really good job with that. So when you go to repair your robot, or repair one of your players on the team, it actually goes into a cutscene, and it shows them taking off the helmet, and like these little arms come down, and they're making adjustments, and then the helmet comes back on and stuff. It's pretty cool. And then when you hit a home run, it goes out the park, of course, and then it turns out that the stadium is actually floating in space, and you get to see like these flyover with these I don't know, a jet, I guess you could call it, spacecraft.
Space Jet.
Space jet?
There you
Yeah,
go.
space jet. So you hit a home run and you get to see the space jet do a flyover.
Mm.
If you hit a grand slam, you get three space jets. So that's pretty cool. And then also, you if you destroy, you can destroy the other robots. Like they have HP.
Hmm.
So if it hits zero, they explode, and there's a whole animation for that. If it happens during a fight, uh, the character that gets HP, the zero hits the ground and then it explodes, but the other one actually does like a little victory dance, you know? So they did, yeah, a really good job with the cutscenes and the animations like that, and the voice work is great. Just yeah, the music just kind of thrown in there. They just had some extra stuff left over from Ninja Turtles or something. Is there anything else, Pete, that you would like to add about Base Wars before we start to wrap up today's show?
I think that we've covered most of the bases. I mean, I could talk about minor things like
That was a nice
like
pun.
the camera not the camera not keeping up with the ball sometimes, but that's such a minor thing, and we've already gone over things in such great detail. I think we're pretty good.
it's a really fantastic game, and hopefully you guys will all go check this one out. Um, like Nick and Pete said, it's really great with a friend. Uh, so if you got a buddy you want to try it out with, that's the best way to play it. The pennant mode race is a grind. It's really fun to try out all the different weapons and stuff, but yeah, you're gonna have to sit through those other games. The best way to do it, I say, is play all of your games first, and then let the rest go. All right. So I think just about do it. But we have one announcement to make for next month's episode. We're getting pretty close to the end of this first season. We're only doing 6 episodes for the first season. Then we're gonna take a 2 month break, and then we'll be back for season two, and we're gonna do 10 episodes for season two. So we're almost there. So coming up on our second to last episode, so I wanted to do something pretty good. Let's see, Nick. Let's see, what have we done so far? We did Uniracers, right?
Mm-hmm.
The racing game.
Yep.
Let's see, then we did Gyrus.
Yep.
All right, so that's our space shooting game, right? Jump, right? That's how the kids
Yep.
say it these days.
These days, ever
Then
since the 90s, or what are we doing here?
forever. All right, and then so see, what did we do after that? We had Beyond Oasis just last month, right? So
Yep.
that's our
Our
action
RPG.
adventure, yeah, technically RPG. Okay, so we did a sports game now. All right, so that leaves us with what? A platform and a fighting game, right?
Yeah, there's cover our bases.
Cover the base, the 6 main bases. We'll get a little deeper into genres next season. So I wanted to do something big because we're almost done for this first season, and I wanted to go big. And I thought, what's bigger than Mortal Kombat 2?
Not a whole lot for that era, at least. Kind of stole the
Exactly.
show.
So
Passed
next
laws.
month, so next month, yes, we'll be covering Mortal Kombat 2, one of my favorite fighting games. I've got a lot of great memories with that one. It's just so good. You can play it on Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, uh, countless other platforms, and of course, arcade. All
It'll be
right.
it'll be fun to go over it.
Yes, sir. It's going to be a lot of fun. We can even maybe talk about those movies a little bit. All right. So once again, Pete Skerritt, I want to thank you, man, for coming on the show. You really brought the knowledge today, man. Thank you so much for sharing everything with us.
Sure, I'm glad to be here. It was a blast. Thanks, guys.
And
Yeah.
hey, if one time, just give a shout out to everyone. Let them know where they can find you on Twitter so they can catch some of your videos and stuff.
So you can find me on Twitter at Pete Skerritt. That's PeteSkerritt. That's the best place to find me. Where I'm always posting pictures of stuff I have in my video game collection and talking about all kinds of retro stuff. So you can follow my stuff there.
Excellent, man. Go check him out. I'm one of his followers too, man. He's always posting great stuff on there. And Nick, of course, thank you, man. As always, appreciate you being here, doing the
Yeah, not
hard
a
work.
problem.
All
Glad
right.
to be here.
Thanks, Ben. And of course, thank you everyone for tuning in. We appreciate you all checking us out, and we'll see you next month for Mortal Kombat 2. And as always, please remember the light at the end of the tunnel may be you. Goodbye, everybody.